Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the May meeting of the California High-Speed Rail Authority's Board of Directors. This morning, we will be hearing taking public comment. Before we do that and start with our agenda, if we could, Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Director Schenk?
Here.
Chair Richards?
Here.
Director Camacho?
Here.
Vice Chair Miller?
Here.
Assembly Member Arambula? Director Perea?
Here.
Director Guillemetti?
Present.
Director Escutia?
Here.
Director Boutros?
Here.
Director Williams?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. And if we could bring the flag up, please. Thank you. If you'd repeat after me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which
stands
one nation under
under
God,
God, indivisible,
with liberty.
and justice for all.
Thank you. With that, we'll now ask the secretary to please let those of you in the public who are joining us today know how you can address the board. And as you know, this is your time to make comments to us. These are generally without any responses. So please don't be offended, but that is the purpose, is for us to listen to you. So Mo, if you'd please give the appropriate instructions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, all. Welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Board of Directors public meeting. Today, we are hosting this meeting remotely via Zoom. In a moment, we will take public comment. First, we want to run through some important technical aspects of this meeting for offering public comment. If you are logged into this meeting via the Zoom application, please use the raise your hand feature typically located at the bottom of your screen so that I may call on you to provide your comment. If you're dialing in by phone, pressing #2 will raise your hand and put you into our queue. Speakers will be called in the order that their hand is raised. Once you've been in the queue and your name is called, in the web meeting, please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. On the phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you'll hear a message that you are being unmuted. Once unmuted, it will be your turn to speak. Please slowly and clearly say and spell your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you represent. After your introduction, each speaker is allotted 2 minutes to provide their comment. Our court reporter is on the line to record those comments. If they need you to spell or repeat something, they may interject. I will notify you when your time is nearly up. At the end of your comment, we will disable your microphone. However, you are welcome to stay on the line to continue watching or listening to the meeting. If you do not wish to provide comment and simply want to watch the meeting, you can do so by logging on to hsr.ca.gov and looking for the link to our live stream. Mr. Chairman, first up for public comment, we have a Vincent Chio.
Good morning, Mr. Steele. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Please state your name and welcome.
Good morning, Chair and Board of Directors. My name is Vincent Chio, Senior Director of Regional Rail from LA Metro. I'm the Environmental Project Manager for the Link Union Station project. Metro appreciates the partnership with the authority as the Nepa lead agency for the project. Metro fully supports the authority staff's recommendation to revise the CO delegation of authority regarding the Nepa process. We believe this action would improve efficiency in the Nepa process while maintaining the transparency in the process. Community engagement is very important to LA Metro as the public transportation planner, coordinator, designer, builder, and operator serving over 10 million people in 88 cities in LA County, with a fleet of over 2,500 Metro buses, 4 light rail systems, and 2 subway systems. As the lead CEQA agency, Metro's conducted extensive public outreach on the Link Union Station project to date, including over 70 scoping meetings, community meetings, open houses, and the like since 2016, with a specific focus on the underserved communities surrounding the station, such as the Willamette homes. The project has received strong support from the surrounding communities and elected officials to date, which resulted in the unanimous support and approval of the final EIR by the Metro Board in June of 2019. Based on the success of the CEQA process, we intend to continue with our community outreach program for the Nepa process, which began with a new environmental scoping meeting in October 2020. Since then, Metro has continued to implement our robust stakeholder engagement program with over 20 meetings with stakeholders in the community. Through our stakeholder engagement and outreach, all stakeholders will be informed of the staff's recommendation on the locally preferred alternative, or LPA, for the Link Union Station NEPA EIS document, which will be presented to the Metro Board Planning and Programming Committee for approval, followed by the full Metro Board meeting for approval. The general public will have the opportunity to provide comments on the recommended LPA at these public hearings. In addition, Metro intends to continue our robust outreach program leading up to the release of the draft EIS by this fall. Thank you for the comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for joining us. We look forward to this new relationship. Our management, I'm sure, will be very, very helpful in the process in trying to expedite your NEPA approval. So thank you again.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment is a Madeline Harris.
Thank you. Madeline, the last name, please.
Yes, good morning, Chair and board members. This is Madeline Harris from Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. I just wanted to log on to make some brief comments and thank the High Speed Rail Authority board and staff for working with our organization and with Fairmead community and friends for the past several years on coming to an agreement with mitigation measures for Fairmead, given High Speed Rail's plans to cut through this community. We're looking forward to continuing to work closely with you on implementing mitigation measures in Fairmead Community and Friends Agreement, and hope to move forward swiftly on your commitments regarding the community center, affordable housing, water, sewer system, and others. So thanks again for your collaboration.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Thanks for joining us and for your comments. Next, please.
Next up, Mr. Chairman, is Roland Lebrun.
Good morning, Mr. Lebrun.
Good morning, Chair Richards, directors. What I'd like to do this morning is to continue the conversation that you started at the Finance and Audit Committee about the cost overruns on CP1. The concern I have here is, why do you need to have this discussion in effectively closed session instead of in public? I'd like to remind you that it's of grave concern to everybody who is watching this, that the so-called change orders are basically in excess of 100% of the initial contract bid. And you had plenty of time to have that discussion, because, as you know, you have moved the Central Valley update to this board meeting, which means that you would actually have had 1 hour to discuss this if you had so chosen, but you did not. Now, the thing that really concerns me is a comment that was made by Director Miller, that these cost overruns were somehow subsequent changes in scope to the contract. Well, let's just look at the Fresno Trench. The Fresno Trench right now is at over $1 billion. That roughly exceeds the initial Q2 Perini bid by approximately $100 million. And my question to you is, how could someone possibly say that the Fresno Trench was not part of the initial 29-mile segment that Q2 Perini bid on? So in closing, let me wrap up. And it's time we start having these discussions in public, including why we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on freight containment barriers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lebrun.
Mr. Chairman, we have next up a member who will provide public comment via the phone, so I will call on the last 4 digits of the phone number, 4749. You are up for public comment.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you please state your name and welcome?
Yes, thank you. My name is Caroline Williams, Caroline Williams, Williams.
Thank you, Ms. Williams, and welcome.
Thank you. I am representing Fair Mead Community and Friends, and I first want to acknowledge that we're very excited about the progress that has been made thus far for improvements to our community, thanks to the high-speed rail. And I also want to just remind us that Fairmead has a rich history which began in 1912. And my late husband's family came to that area in the late 1940s. And one of the reasons that they relocated there was because it was affordable and it was a great place to raise a family. And so now we're looking at a future for Fairmead. And we believe that a rich future also requires affordable housing, along with the improvements that have already been outlined. So we're very hopeful that the high-speed rail will be actively engaged in the process for us to successfully obtain affordable housing in Fairmead. Without affordable housing, our growth will be stunted. We believe that people will come if they can afford to come. And so we just want to acknowledge that we appreciate everything that has been done, but we are certainly looking forward to continuing our work with high-speed rail. And we do want high-speed rail to continue to engage with us so that we can be successful in our bid for affordable housing. Thank you.
Thanks you, Ms. Williams, and we look forward for our continued relationship with Fairmead and your organization.
Mr. Chairman, at this moment, we don't have any members of the public with their hand raised.
Okay. Thank you, Mo. With that then, colleagues, we will move on to our today's agenda. And as you note, item number 1 is the action on our April board meeting minutes. If there are no proposed changes, could we have a motion for approval, please?
So moved. Second.
It's a motion by Director Camacho and a second by, I'm sorry, is that Director Schenk? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any objections? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Moving on this morning now to agenda item 2 is the updated proposal for revision to the CEO delegation related to the Nepa assignment. I believe that our Chief Counsel, Alicia Fowler, is going to take care of this. Alicia, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, board members. We also have Serge Stanich, our environmental director, back to assist with this presentation. And I think our hope was maybe we'd start with a quick PowerPoint to get us back up to speed. The goal here, though, is to finalize a delegation of authority to the CEO related to these local sponsor projects and their final environmental documents. And we've heard a lot of input from you all last month and again throughout this week, and we really want to try to meet the needs of this board. But Serge, maybe we can start with walking through this presentation.
Certainly. Good morning, board members, Chair Richards and Vice Chair Miller. Could we advance to the next slide, please? So staff have put forward this recommendation to update our delegation of authority to align it with the realities of the NEPA assignment program, which was granted and executed between the state of California and the FRA in 2019. There were some outdated elements that were conditional on the recommendation or the approval of the NEPA assignment program. And the original delegation of authority didn't really align itself for some of the responsibilities that were given the authority through the NEPA assignment MOU, such as these, what we refer to as off-system projects, like the LA Metro Link US Union Station project or the Stockton Diamond project that's part of the ACE Forward project. So we wanted to go over a little bit what the process is and what we've come forward with a revised recommendation to address some of the comments that we understood from the last meeting. So first off, we'll talk a little bit about what the existing process is by the authority that we follow for all of our phase 1 projects. So for all of our projects from San Francisco to Anaheim, for which the authority has the approval responsibility, this is what we implement. First, we approach the board after staff have gone out and identified a preferred alternative. We seek board approval in concurrence with the staff recommendation for the preferred alternative. And then the staff then move forward with publishing or issuing the draft EIR-EIS. That's circulated for 45 days. And during that time, we get public comment from stakeholders, communities, responsible cooperating agencies. Staff then take those comments, consider them, and then update the record and update the draft to prepare what becomes the final EIR-EIS. We then publish the draft EIR-EIS, and as a requirement of NEPA, there's a provision for a 30-day wait period before that record of decision can be executed. So we would publish the draft, wait a minimum of 30 days until the next available board meeting would come up, and then we'd present our recommendation for approval of the FEIR-EIS, certification that the document conforms, approval of the findings, and then ask for approval to execute or sign the record of decision. For our local sponsored projects, this kind of creates a certain amount of inefficiency for that tail end regarding having 2 board actions. So, and it also doesn't really align with provisions of the FAST Act to where possible, combine the final EIS with the record of decision. Can we move to the next slide, please? And so our recommendation to update the delegation of authority, and in consideration of some of the comments that we heard at the last meeting, we would work with our local sponsor, who is the lead agency for actually developing the admin draft. We also work with the lead agency in reviewing the admin draft and overseeing some of the stakeholder coordination. But the local sponsor would then go to their agency to identify a preferred alternative. The local agency would then approve the project, and then it would come to our board, where we would present it to our board for an informational item. And then we would also kind of expand on what the project is, what the preferred alternative, and elaborate on the community engagement that's been done and how the community and the public at large could actually participate and comment on the project. The EIR-EIS process provides for specific times for public engagement and taking public comment, and that's through that public circulation period. So after we would present to our board on what that recommendation is, we would then authorize the local sponsor to then publish the draft EIR-EIS. Comments would then be received by the local sponsor to consolidate, delimit, start preparing responses, and then revise that record and prepare a final EIS as necessary. We then propose, if the document meets our NEPA assignment team's considerations for adequacy of NEPA, we could then recommend it for approval. This would enable our CEO to then sign the final EIS and sign the record of decision that would be included in the FEIS and ROD as a combined document. This would then save that time on the tail end regarding the wait period, and it aligns with the FAST Act. So our board would come, or pardon me, our CEO would then come to the board with a notification element and an update regarding the intent to sign that record of decision. After that update, we would deliver the signed EIS and ROD to the local sponsor, who could then publish the FEIS and ROD. So if you can move to the next slide, please. This next slide essentially kind of aligns the differences between the two processes. So I want to reiterate that our recommendations for this updated or revised delegation of authority would maintain entirely the same process by which we would come to the board for approval before signing the record of decision and definitely before publishing or identifying a preferred alternative. So nothing changes for our phase 1 or in the future our phase 2 projects. This would simply align or address projects that we consider off system, for which there is another California agency responsible for CEQA and responsible for delivering this that would actually do the bulk of the work. We would simply be providing that NEPA oversight as is provided for the NEPA assignment MOU. You can, I think the next slide is actually the last slide, and it just closes this. And so we can close the slide, but the recommended language that we've drafted to address this includes two elements. We tried to make it clear as far as what the board had approved in the prior meeting, and then highlight the new language that is up for the board's consideration today. And so that is item 3, where we clearly delineate these activities for off-system projects where the CEO would be given the authority to sign CEs or EA FONSIs for these kind of smaller projects that involve minimal impacts. However, include the enhanced process by which we inform the board of our recommendations for the EIS. So, Alicia, were there any other comments you should add, or perhaps something I've neglected?
No, that was perfect, Serge. And I think we both just said we were trying to meet the needs of what we heard from the board. And we're hoping we've gotten there today.
All right. Thank you, Alicia. Any questions or comments from my colleagues on the board? Yes, Director Shank.
Yeah, Serge, could you put that chart back on the phase 1 and 2 again?
Sure, Mo, I would ask you to do the slide deck, please.
The last.
The comparison of the crosswalk.
You're right. Thank you. Okay. So maybe I'm just not reading this correctly, but it looks like there's, a briefing to the board. There's a notification to the board, but I don't see real input and decision by the board on those two circles, those two green circles.
Correct. So, I mean, Board Member Shank, that is the goal here, is to delegate the authority to actually, make the approvals to the CEO and the NEPA assignment team through him. But to ensure, from what we heard from you last month, to ensure this board is both aware of the project, but I think what we really heard was the board wanted to make sure the public was aware of the project, was aware of how to give public comment and be involved in the project that's not ours, but is in this case one of the local sponsor projects.
Yeah, but Alicia, my experience with this board and prior management and this management, it's nobody's fault. It's just the way it is. I get concerned when there's just briefing and notifying. It isn't getting to what I want. I mean, I understand the delegation of authority and I understand that, but I really would like to see something stronger in terms of when the board and the public get this information and the opportunity for the board to actually respond and give input. Because we have a lot of smart people on this board who have had experience in this, not myself notwithstanding, that who would be able to be helpful on this. But this is, is this just a written notice 10 minutes before? Is it? I would just like to see this tightened up.
I understand. And I think when I look at the first green bubble, the staff and local sponsor brief, the authority board, the intent would be to bring the local sponsor to the board themselves and for both our staff and their staff to spend a lot of time explaining to the board the process that has occurred and the process that will occur. And I think that would be the time for any board input to be meaningful for a local sponsor project. Because that
But
is
not if we're
the time
getting
they
it.
can still
Really
make
sorry
change
to
and listen
interrupt,
to
but not if we're getting it, the day before the meeting or 2 days before the meeting. This is complicated stuff. And that's what's happens, not just because of COVID, that's just sort of the rhythm of the way we get things. And, it looks good on paper, but when it's translated into practice, I find often I'm struggling. I mean, most of us on the board have a different day job, and so we try to squeeze this in to be prepared. And maybe it's just working out a timing of when we get the information, how much information we get, how much time we have to actually digest it. So maybe that's the issue.
And I understand. I know with our own process and the projects on our own alignment, we are trying very hard to give you over a month with them. You're right. This process might be a little different because we won't be in charge of the documents. Serge, I don't know if you have a different sense or a sense of what kind of timing we would be able to give our board to spend time with that.
Well, I mean, I think we're trying to manage a number of procedural elements that fall within the Nepa process regarding these discrete periods that afford a lead agency to take comment and have an efficient process. And so the Metro, on the instance that we're talking about right now, is the lead agency that would initiate a public review period for 45 days at minimum on this project. And that is, quite frankly, it's the most timely opportunity for all parties, and including ourselves as partners to LA Metro, to provide feedback on their project, to incorporate it into their consideration and as part of the administrative record. And that's why we thought that recommending an informational item before the event became public, before the document was made published for the 45-day comment period, it would kind of serve as that notification period that this document is coming, and then we would clearly identify what the public comment period would be. So if we came to the board, let's say in September, I'm not committing to this as the schedule, we need LA Metro to agree to it, but let's say that the anticipated publication date and public review was to start October 15th and run through December, we would come to the board in September, the authorities board, and say, the LA Metro and California High-Speed Rail Authority in partnership are putting forward this document for public review. This would be the window of time for comments to be received. And then we would make that information or the links available in direct traffic to the Metro site. Our concern to staff regarding another event between the draft and the final where comment is taken or provided would kind of break that process up and add complications to the administrative record. So that was really our intent, is to try to align our process with kind of standard procedures.
I understand what the intent is, Serge. Andre, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you probably have most of the experience in this regard. And so I'd love to hear your, if my concerns are valid in terms of your longstanding experience in this.
Thanks, Lynn. Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes, please.
I do have a great concern about the process that's laid out. First is we don't really want to be involved in the draft environmental document before it is released to the public. That is not really the role of this board. The role of this board should be really looking at the final product to ensure that it meets the requirements, first of the Nepa delegation that is given to this board, and then is to really look at what are the potential impacts of this project, potential environmental impacts, which may also involve community impacts that we really need to be aware of, that we can answer to. At the end of the day, whether Brian signs the document or not, this board is responsible for that signature. We're delegating that authority, but it is this board that has that responsibility when we're signing off on a document. So, a couple of things that are not really identified at the draft environmental stage, which are the significant environmental impacts, which we really don't know the extent of those until the public process takes place and collection of information and response to issues is documented in that document. And the other thing is, what are the overriding considerations that the agency is taking in that process to move that project forward? Those are not really clear at the draft environmental stage. I think the presentation needs to be made after the final document, before the LA board is acting on that document. So this board is aware of what are the issues that are of significance and how the agency is responding to them. And I'm not saying that this board needs to take an action to approve the document ourselves, but at least we are aware of what the document entails. So when Brian or the CEO is taking that final action, that he's taken it with our knowledge. Without that knowledge, I'm afraid that we're giving a delegation of authority to something that we really will have no idea what it is about. And I think that is a dangerous precedence to set. And that actually puts Brian at a risk himself in the long run, because there's really no cover for him at that point, because we haven't heard anything. We're hearing draft document, draft solutions that have not really been panned out or resolved with public input. And those are my concerns. If this is really the move that this board is moving forward, I'll be voting no on it. So.
Thank you, Director Boutrous, for your comments. Do we have other comments or questions from any members of the board?
Tom, I have
yes, please go ahead.
One question on the document after this presentation on the delegation of authority, which would be I guess 4. The CEO, we have the CEO's delegated the authority to amend any contract by any dollar amount, provided the action is consistent with the program baseline. The number 1 of that same section says contract amounts up to 25 million. The CEO's delegated authority. I have no problems with the 25 million, but down below this is inconsistent when we say that they have the right to amend any contract by any dollar amount. That's inconsistent with the first part of the.
I think Henry, I think Ernie, that we are only dealing with section H of the delegation of authority.
I would say that is correct, Chair Richards.
Yes.
But if Board Member Camacho just wants to point me to that, I'm certainly happy to look at it and see if it's something we need to bring back to you guys on an agenda item. Which
I mean, we can as to your comments, Ernie, we can certainly re-agendize this with at a subsequent meeting, because this document deals with all of the delegation of authority, whereas the issue today is just on.
Well, it was at least part of agenda item 2, and so
Yeah, I understand.
If we could address that at a later time, that would be great.
Absolutely, you can count on it. Alicia, if you would follow up on that for a future meeting, and if we can talk about that in advance of it getting agendized.
Absolutely, thank you.
Any other? Yes, Vice Chair Miller.
So let me just, Andre, as I understand this process, which is the what they call the FAST I mean, I actually don't know what they call it, but it's the fast process with the whole NEPA designation. And we are not the lead agency on these local sponsor projects, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so they're having their hearings, they're doing their outreach, and we are trying to just make sure it's, as I understand it, it's the administrative process where we sign off that it complied with NEPA, since they're already doing, I think they've completed CEQA usually with is that correct?
That's correct. In this instance, that's correct.
So understanding that the idea, as I understand it from LA Metro, is to expedite the process so that we can get these environmental documents fully vetted with the public and public hearings, but also have a process that kind of tries to move the record of decision and the NEPA compliance in a more timely fashion. I think that's what we're looking at today, is something to try to do that. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
So, Andre, the only question that I have about waiting till the end is that, there is an administrative record. Lots of times these are controversial. There may be litigation, and our board isn't the policy-making board for whatever this project is. We're the compliance board, as I understand it. Is that right?
But how do you make a statement of compliance if you don't know what the final document?
Well, I think that's a good point. I think, and so my question to staff is there a time that that answers what Andre's concern is, which is, I'm just looking at a draft. What's the final going to be? But I think part of that is, Andre, that you're looking at compliance. That's when you have to say it followed it. Because if you don't say it then, they could get all the way through responses to comments, the whole 9 yards, and then suddenly, that's a question.
I think the process as was explained to me is that staff is going to be working with the agency all along. The board, us, you and I and everyone else here on this board, is really not in the position to see the final product until the final product. So the staff should be guiding the agency to a certain extent to ensure that they're following the process to make sure that at the end of the day the final product is going to be in compliance. But for us, we're not going to be involved on the day-to-day operations. Neither do we want to, and I don't really think it's appropriate for us to be reviewing a draft document when the document may change. I mean, you know how many amendments we've made to the documents that we just approved just a few months back. There were tons of changes to those documents, and the statements of overriding considerations are not really done until the last minute. So that's really the compliance piece, is to ensure that those were done appropriately. You're not going to be able to say that until the end.
Well, except that those statements are in the document. It would be in the draft. What needs to be overrode, what doesn't, and they would have those.
Yeah, but the final document is the one that nails everything down. That's basically what you're going with, right?
Well, except that that's more, compliance to me is different than approval. I mean, that's technically kind of where I'm going, which is they may do something that we might not want to do as a board, but as a lead agency, that's their prerogative, right?
Yeah, I'm not saying we're involved in the policy statement or anything of that nature. I think you have a role. I mean, maybe someone needs to explain what is the real role for this board with respect to the NEPA delegation,
right?
And that becomes the basis for what this action will entail. Right now, we're all working in the dark. I mean, yeah, we have a NEPA delegation, but what does it really entail? And let's put that down and amend this paragraph to reflect that. Because to me, if I'm gonna give a delegation of authority to the CEO to something that I am misunderstanding, I don't want to do it, because my understanding of an environmental document is totally different than, you know, what I'm being led to believe, right? You know, there's still even though we're just a responsible agency, we still have a responsibility as the agency who is at the end of the day going to sign off on the ROD.
Well,
We still have a responsibility.
Yeah, maybe staff can answer that, because I'm assuming that our staff is working with them as a responsible agency, but even as a responsible agency, you don't have a whole lot of input. And I want to be mindful of what LA Metro was in support of this, because it's a timing, it's trying to do it in the process that is more efficient. So I guess maybe Andre's question is good, which is, what is our role just a compliance, like a check the box, or are we supposed to be, you know, when is the appropriate time? Yes.
And I agree with Andre's concern there that he's raised towards the end, and your comments. So I think one of the problems that we're having here, perhaps, Alicia, is a clear understanding of what this board's role is. And I'm aware, colleagues, that I am aware that we are unique, as I understand it, with other states that have NEPA assignment. How we're different, as I understand it at least, is that we're the only state that actually, where this assignment has come to this authority, the other states, basically the assignment goes to their departments of transportation. And they then parcel the assignment out, the responsibility for the assignment and oversight of it, to a member of staff or members of staff. So here, for what we're doing, it's the only one that I believe that we are aware of that actually has a board of directors. And where normally, if we weren't here, I assume California would have done the same thing that other states have done, generally acting with NEPA assignment on highway projects that would have been done at the staff level. So, Alicia, to the extent that the board could be made better aware of and understand exactly what our responsibilities are and what exposure the decisions we make have, would be really helpful. Is that something that you're able to address to the board today?
I think we can try.
Okay.
Serge, I see Serge raising his hand. I'm going to let him dive in first, and then
I would like to provide a couple of clarifications. I think the situation that we have with Metro is unique. It's also novel, so it creates a new situation for us to work through. But it's important to note that you know, let me answer or address a few clarifying elements. Publishing a draft, I would argue, is actually a very robust exercise where the lead agency, because we ourselves are doing this across all of our project sections, we do a robust exercise to identify what the scope of the project is and what the potential environmental impacts are, and the potentially significant impacts with respect to socioeconomics and communities and cultural resources and air quality and traffic impacts, as Metro is doing right now. The draft environmental document needs to clearly identify all of these potentially significant impacts. And if during public review an entity comments and notes that we missed something, that is a deficiency that would trigger recirculation. So the draft document is generally a very robust document that identifies all these significant impacts and includes mitigation measures to offset those. Another clarifying element is the use of the term the considerations to overriding considerations, and the concept of a responsible agency. The responsible agency and the overriding considerations fall within CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. And so the High-Speed Rail Authority is a responsible agency with respect to CEQA. And that's where we act, and we can comment on and participate in the process on other state agencies that would affect our projects and our infrastructure. In this instance, LA Metro is the lead agency with respect to CEQA, and they completed the EIR for this project back in 2019. So regarding the overriding considerations, that's been published and that was approved by their board. So the next question is, what is the authority's responsibility with respect to NEPA assignment? The NEPA assignment program was granted to the authority through the MOU by the FRA to take on the responsibility of the mantle of what the FRA was doing in overseeing the National Environmental Policy Act, which is a policy on evaluating and disclosing impacts that are provided or bounded by the Council on Environmental Quality, the National Environmental Policy Act, and various DOT guidance, such as the FAST Act. And so where FRA staff were reviewing our document or reviewing Metro's document for sufficiency with all of the executive orders and NEPA, our staff are replacing or serving in that role on behalf of the FRA. And so it really is much more of a check the box type of scenario to make sure that the methodologies for air quality conform to the EPA model standards, that environmental justice meets the executive orders for outreach and coordination, that we have air quality conformity. This is going to be a very important element for LA Metro's project, and we will be facilitating their work where FRA still holds the responsibility for general conformity determinations, just as they are with us. So our request here to modify the delegation of authority aligns our delegation of authority to be consistent with how NEPA is implemented with Caltrans, with other DOTs, and with standard NEPA process, where many of these decisions are essentially evaluated at the staff level and signed and executed at the staff level. So the authority with its structure as a board is unique. And that's why we came forward, because it doesn't really align with common practice for NEPA. But it's all the comments made absolutely align with CEQA, but we have here a split process where we're only serving as the NEPA oversight manager. And I have to emphasize again, there's another state agency that is, funded by, state dollars and federal dollars as well. But the LA Metro board is the one that is directing staff to do this engagement. And as it is a local project that is affecting the local residents, I think much of that outreach is best handled at the local level, where residents can appeal to their neighbors and their communities and the board there to address their concerns on the project.
Mr. Stanich, let me ask a question. If NEPA had not provided the assignment to California and ultimately to us, if this was a LA Metro project and it was moving through the environmental process and FRA was still involved, would FRA be would they be authorizing or approving the draft environmental impact statement?
They would acknowledge its sufficiency before.
I don't want to. I'm asking, do they approve it or just acknowledge it?
They approve it for release, that it meets sufficiency, but it's their staff that do that. Yes, the FRA would be responsible to authorize the Metro to publish the draft, but it would be the FRA that would notice it in the register.
The FRA doesn't have a board of directors, obviously.
Correct. It's the administrator that would sign it.
So it's done at the staff level.
That's correct.
So the challenge we've got here is we've got a board of directors.
Correct.
So
I think that's really the issue here, Mr. Chair, is that we continue to compare ourselves with Caltrans, staff with Caltrans. Caltrans doesn't have a board of directors.
Yeah.
Caltrans is the agency that's delegated that authority. In this case, the board is delegated that authority. So we need to differentiate between the two, and we need to, come up with with something that satisfies the role that is entrusted in this body. And if we can come to an agreement that this body has a say in what the final document really ends up being, then we're fine, moving forward. And I go back to you're saying it's a checklist. It's really not a check the box kind of thing. It's a check the box in terms of compliance with certain rules and regulations, but you're still looking at the project and its impacts. FRA, I'm sure, is going to look at the project and its impacts regardless of whether they're checking the boxes or not. And that's all I'm asking here, is that we're at least aware of the impacts of the project. So when that delegation is carried forward by the CEO, that at least we are aware of what the impacts are going to be.
Yeah.
That's all really that I'm asking for. I'm not asking for the board to approve the document. I'm asking for the board to be informed of the final product that is going to be executed, through the ROD, through the final approval.
Okay, and so, Alicia, given also what Andre has just stated, I think that what the attempt here is to try to streamline the system to make it more efficient, and it's my understanding that's the intention of FRA also. With what Andre just said, I get the sense that what staff's has done is try to figure out how we can exercise appropriately the assignment and do it in a more efficient manner in order to move projects along more quickly. If that's the case, and with what Andre has just said, that he's not, from his perspective, he's not soliciting the board to take a position that we need to actually approve the final EIR, but rather be made aware of the document and the process that had gone on since this board, the way this is set up right now, would have approved the draft environmental impact statement. How can we do that? And is there a more efficient way of doing that? What are you trying to save? Are you primarily trying to save 30 days? Is that what we're talking about?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Alicia.
No, go ahead.
Well, we are saving 30 days. We're also helping to essentially consolidate and streamline how comments are made on the document. And depending on how
does that have a time? You've acknowledged 30 days. Is there additional time savings beyond the 30 days that you're suggesting here? And if so, what are they?
Well, the time savings are principally between the FEIS and the ROD. There is an efficiency regarding how public comment is received. If the delegation of authority were to be amended from how it's currently proposed to simply come with an informational item before the CEO signs the record of decision, that would not impede the possibility of streamlining. I would be concerned that there might be consideration of comments received or concerns expressed at that point that would modify or potentially modify the document, which is, quite frankly, it's just an inopportune time to then comment to the what is about to be a final EIS on additional changes. But if the board seeks,
excuse me, but aren't we just dealing with compliance? We're looking for compliance with the law.
Correct.
Okay, so I mean, we're not trying to interpose ourselves, I don't believe, in acting as a sponsoring authority.
Understood.
I want to jump in here if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. This is kind of one of those things where which comes first, the egg or the chicken kind of thing. The presentation that's made to the board is an informational item. There is no action by this board. There is no requirement that this board follow up on any comment that is made by the public. it's an informational item. The lead agency is the LA Metro, who is responsible for ensuring that their final document meets all the requirements that exist anywhere related to that environmental law, right? So if they have to go back and revisit the document because of a public comment that was made that they recorded, that's their responsibility. It's not ours. And we're not dictating that responsibility. They can take it on or ignore it. They are responsible for it. All we're doing here is really, like you said, checking the boxes that we've done our role. And our role is to listen and debate the project as an informational item, through the delegation that we gave to the CEO to sign off on the ROD. So I don't really see all these, hoops that you're trying to lay out here. This is pretty straightforward. The agency has completed their product before they send it to us. That's the final. They've already supposedly responded and made everybody happy, through their process. We're just listening to what the document entails. It's a final report. So why are we going through all these hoops? It's pretty straightforward.
So, Chair Richard, I
think why is
we give an easy fix to the ask if that is what the board wants. Again, I think we were trying to meet this idea of ensuring a lot of public engagement at the outset. But I know Chair Boutros is really just proposing, an informational item kind of at the end, and that's an easy fix if that is what the wants. I don't know if that meets what everybody else is looking for.
Okay.
I have some proposed language for you if that's helpful.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Director Perea.
Yeah. First, I want to thank staff for the report or what they've brought to us. I think they've brought to us in general what we asked for at the last meeting. But in listening to this conversation, I just want to be clear. Member Boutros made a comment that I think is pretty valid here, and I want to see if it fits or not. He had mentioned, for example, what if there's a disadvantaged community that is being severely impacted and they have issues? So does that, even with our current authority to approve this process, does that fall within our purview so that, yes, they've gone through the processes, in this case in LA, but they're still being impacted severely, and LA Metro is not responding, at least the way they think they should, on their issues. Today, does that community have a right to come to our board, express their concerns, and then us work with or talk to LA Metro about doing better than what they've done so far? Or is that beyond our purview, whether we have this authority or whether we delegate it?
I think that question is coming to me. I think disadvantaged communities can make appeals to all resources that are available to them. The agencies have within their process these defined limits to where they would circulate the document. If there are continued challenges or concerns, then of course our board can address those with the Metro board or make these comments. What we're trying to do is to try to allow the lead agency to continue to own that process where we facilitate the review. In the communications that we've had internally regarding the concerns that we've heard, Alicia and I had developed, even from our proposed language, an alternate remedy that I think would meet to Director Boutros's concern. And with the two bullet points that we have in item 3, we have 2 items here. The first item was to try to facilitate engagement. But if we could merge those, quite frankly, and say that the CEO would be delegated the authority to approve the release of a draft EIS and final EIS and approve the project in a ROD, provided the CEO and local sponsor representative present a project summary to the board prior to signing the ROD approving the project. And I think,
Okay.
if I hear correctly, I think that's what Director Boutros has asked, but with a simple modification, we could get to that point.
Okay, but you're not answering my question.
I'm sorry.
And that's okay. That's okay. Maybe I didn't say it clearly, but there's a different psychology or different dynamic to when a board is just given an informational report versus a board having authority to have some influence. So at the beginning of your comment, you said a community, if they have concerns, in this case, say it's a disadvantaged community that has a concern about their impacts and they're not being dealt with by the lead agency. In my world, when they come to me and share their concerns, and all I can do is listen to them versus I can take an action or influence them because I have a vote, it's a different dynamic. And I'm just wondering now, after listening to this discussion, whether giving up that opportunity to represent that community early on in this process is worth the trade-off of we trying to be not 30 days off of a process. I would say that the agency, lead agency, should be more efficient in what they're doing, as opposed to telling me as a high-speed rail board, I'm going to give up my authority to weigh in on that decision, on that issue for those 30 days. I think going back to, Member Boutros' original comments, I think I'm with him. I don't think I support this. I'm not willing to give up any more of our authority as a board.
I agree with you, Henry.
Director, yes, Director Gilmetti.
What happens if we don't delegate our authority? What happens to LA Metro? Where do they have to go? And we're out of the picture. What do they have to do?
If we don't delegate,
if
you don't delegate the authority, we'll simply be bringing the project to you for a vote at that later date to
what's it do for their timing? They have to go independently. They don't get a Nepa delegation, correct?
Right.
Correct. So this board would have to approve.
So what's that add to their timeline?
They can't move forward.
It would add a procedural step if we had to go to our board before approval on the FEIS and ROD before their board could approve releasing the final. So it adds an extra procedural step and a complication where our board potentially would be voting on their action. So
maybe that's the answer.
Hey, can I suggest you put the graph that you had on the screen for a minute? I want to point to something. The one that has the two layers.
Yeah, what we call the crosswalk.
The parallel, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Justin, are you able to pull that up?
Mo, are you able to pull up the
There we go.
Okay, so if you look at the process for phase 1 and 2, our projects, the board approves the project under CEQA, direct CEO to sign ROD. It's a similar process for NEPA, I'm assuming, right?
Yes, these are combined documents, so we merge.
So you're saying you said CEQA, but it applies to both. So essentially, what I'm asking for is that where you issue the FEIR, FEIS, that's where it's issued, basically made public. That would be the point in time where you would make the presentation to the board. So it can be within that 30-day wait period. And then the CEO can sign off if the delegation is awarded within the blue box. Essentially, I mean, looking at it just between those two circles. So it's really not going to present a lot of delays in the process.
And that would speak to my concerns. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. So
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that, that's kind of clear,
Yeah,
to what I was really after here. It's not, I'm not trying to create another layer, another bubble here that, that will take more time. I think within that 30 days, we should be able to find a board meeting to make that presentation.
Right.
Thank you, Andre. Director Escutia, please.
Yes, the question that I have though, and it's also to follow up on some comments made by Director Schenk. In this process, we do lose decision-making authority. So Andre, are you going back to that two-layered slide? Is there anywhere in there where there's a possibility of, say, within those 30 days, of including an opportunity for the board to approve this?
Well, that's really the question here. What I'm really envisioning this is that the presentation is made to the board as an informational item with the understanding that the CEO is already given the delegation to sign off on the project once that presentation is made. So now, let's say the board may have an issue with some of the project or some of the environmental impacts or the considerations that are being presented. Can the board direct the CEO not to sign off on the document? I mean, that's what I was, question.
Right.
That's a question that may actually answer Director Schenk's concern to a certain extent, and I don't know who else said I'm not really willing to give any more delegation. I can't remember which. Whether it was Henry or
Director Perez.
Ernie, yeah. So that can bring that play into the decision making process for the board. At least you have an opportunity to provide some input, even though it's indirect in a way. That's your if you would, that's your the check gate, I guess. I'm trying to find a word to describe it here. That's your trigger to move that document forward or not if you're not happy with it. But whether you gave the delegation to the CEO or not, you really still have a responsibility overall as a board. I mean, we still have a responsibility.
I know, but I would prefer to have that responsibility memorialized pursuant to a vote. I don't want to be a participant. I want to be a decision maker.
Yeah. Well, that's another discussion. Whether you approve the delegation or not. I was really trying to work within the delegation concept. If we were to delegate, then I want to be informed of what the final document is, and I want to be able to be comfortable with it. But I can see your point.
But Andre, remember, and I also remind the board members that we have already delegated previously, I think in the last meeting, 2 areas in which our CEO has prime authority, on very simple projects, on projects in which there's no controversy. So it's not like we are not delegating. We are delegating on certain non-controversial items. Yeah. But it is on this one, on local sponsor initiatives, and I understand where Henry Perea is coming from in terms of disadvantaged communities. And when I hear the word that they have the rights to appeal, that they can appeal, it scares me, because to me as a lawyer, I assume that, so what do we expect, disadvantaged communities to do? Hire a lawyer to file a sequel lawsuit to stop this? There's not enough money with these communities, and trying to stop, trying to get their ability to convey their thoughts on these projects. They basically rely on people like Henry, on people like me, on people like Ernie, who already sit on these boards. We understand their concerns. And so therefore we try to, obviously unofficially, talk to Brian and say, hey, Brian, can you do this? Can you do that? And Brian might decide to do it, might decide not to do it. I want that ability to do that. I want to help my community, to count on me to help them out, and so therefore, as a board member who does not like to be a participant, but rather a decision maker, I would want to have the ability not only to listen to the presentations, but also to vote upon it, hopefully within the 30 days limit, so that we don't, make this process any longer than it should take.
Thank
You
you,
know,
Director Patricia. If I can, Director, our Vice Chair Miller, did you have something? I thought I saw a few minutes ago.
Well, I was going to say that the compromise language that staff had, I thought Andre was saying that did it. I just want to remind the board that there is a lead agency on this, which is LA Metro. So when we come for approval, what we're doing is basically saying compliance with NEPA. We're not supposed to be directing them on how to approve the project itself, the policy issues, but I understand the need to want to be able to hear concerns. So I think I don't know, Andre, are you okay with that language? Are we good with that? Because I don't want to go too far down.
I don't agree with the language that was presented directly as presented. I would suggest that it would be reflected in a graph like this, where it is after the FEIR, but before the signature of the ROD. I don't want to say before signature of ROD and just, keep it open-ended, because that's an open-ended statement. The other thing I wanted to really say here, and this is my understanding, that this process here is really applicable to 2 projects. Those are the only 2 projects we're aware of. So, what's the point really of having this elaborate process laid out here for 2 projects? And how much time are we really saving in the long run? And is it really worth it? Or should we be looking at what Director Escuria said here and say, maybe we should just hear about it and, take a vote to direct the CEO to sign off on the ROD instead of giving that delegation so he can sign the ROD. I mean, we still have that role to play, and really all the delegation we're giving in response to Director Miller is that the delegation is really only related to the role of the board with respect to the NEPA delegation, the NEPA assignment. We're not really exceeding that delegation spirit, or the letter of that delegation. We don't want to really go outside of that delegation in terms of roles of lead agency or otherwise. We're just strictly looking at this from that assignment that was given to this board.
I think that all we're doing is we are ensuring compliance. We may or may not. I mean, it's not the project itself. We're not the lead agency on.
Right.
We may not agree with individually on the project itself, but that's not the role we're playing. It's just making sure we're compliance with NEPA. That's all.
Right. Whatever the letter said. I mean, whatever the assignment said. The assignment may not necessarily say, our responsibility is to do full compliance with NEPA. It may have said, certain things, and we need to really make sure that we understand the specific role of the board.
Yeah.
I go back to that.
Yeah, and so we're trying to do that in at the same time to streamline the system to make it more efficient.
Tom, it's Lynn. I don't know how to raise my hand here with this on.
No, that's good.
Can you see me? Okay, so look, I'm very sympathetic to what Martha is saying. I think all of us, if I may say, are interested in the underserved communities, not just people who are elected to represent them. And this board has been sensitive to that for as long as I've been on it, or tried to be, at least speaking for myself. What Andre is proposing meets my concerns about timing when we have an opportunity to hear the information and to at least provide feedback. I have confidence in Brian and the management team that if there were something untoward or something that I can't even think of right now, where the board felt strongly about it, I can't imagine that he would go forward and sign it. We're a team here. So I like what Andre, I think what you proposed as sort of a change in where we get the information. And if we do that, then I can support the delegation.
Okay. Is that a motion that you want to craft?
Tom, could I read perhaps what that language might
Thank you.
sound like, if that is the
Yes,
direction?
please. Thanks.
Okay. If I can have this right, Lynn, work with me.
Yeah, thank you.
Item 3C would read, approve the release of a draft EIS and final EIR and approve the project in a final EIS and approve the project in a ROD, provided the CEO and local sponsor representative present a project summary to the board between the time the local project sponsor issues an FEI or FEIS and prior to signing a ROD approving the project.
Yes.
Okay. I hear one. Is that Andre?
I think that captures what Andre was saying.
I think he agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, moved.
Okay.
So moved.
Okay, that's a move by Vice Chair Miller.
Second.
Second, please.
Second.
Second by Director Schenk. Please call the roll.
Director Schenk,
Yes.
Chair Richards,
Yes.
Camacho,
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller,
Yes.
Director Perea,
Yes.
Director Guillemette,
Yes.
Director Scutia.
She had to step away for about 10 minutes, but
She's on.
No, I'm here. I was
okay,
muted.
great.
I'm sorry. I'm a yes.
Director Boutros,
No, yes.
It's your language.
Director Williams.
Hi. All right, thank you, colleagues. That was 5 ayes and one nay. All right, 9-0. Thank you very much. Moving on.
By the way, that was a very good discussion and the kind that I hope we continue to have amongst ourselves. It really was. And
Right.
Thanks to the staff for making it possible.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is the construction update, and we'll take 15 minutes off the time here. I mean that only jokingly, but it's.
No, don't joke. Do it.
Okay, 30 minutes. All right, CEO Kelly.
Hi, good afternoon, members. Brian Kelly, Chief Executive Officer of the California High Speed Rail Authority. That was a good discussion. I want to present to you here construction update, which obviously we've shared in advance of the hearing with the board members. I want to say why I think it's timely now. There's a lot of things going on, but I think we're approaching an important milestone on the project, which is getting to full 100% design completion for the CPs that are in the Central Valley. And that is really the beginning and the first time since I've been here that we've been in a stage where we have the scope of the project defined and we start to, amend the original contract. So all that scope is in, and then we can advance the construction work. And so it's an important time to talk about where the project is. We spent a lot of time talking about history and whether, starting construction soon and what that entailed, and the fact that not all the scope was in when the construction was let. And there's been, as we've discussed in our business plan and other public places, issues with that, including the requirement that we issue a series of change orders to accommodate all the scope that's necessary to get the work done, and how we have to go forward. So I thought now was a good time to describe for you exactly where we are on each of the CPs, describe for you the change orders that I think most of you already know, because we report these each month at the F&A committee, and all members have access to those reports, but each month we report exactly where we are on change orders for each CP. But this is a good time to stop and say, here's where we are, here's what you get with the scope in, and here's why it's important that scope get in so that we can better manage going forward where we are. The other thing I'd say at the outset here is that it's important to note, going forward, we are poised to implement, and we've talked to the board about this. We've done a presentation on it, and we discussed it at length in Chapter 6 of the business plan, is the implementation of what we call the stage gate process going forward. So that as we get toward construction procurement going forward, we'll have reduced a lot of risk on the front end. We'll have advanced design further. We'll have identified right-of-way, utility relocation needs, and we start addressing those in advance, much more advanced than we were able to do on the beginning of these construction contracts. So I want to start by saying that, but then say on the 119, we're actually starting to see the end of this rather than being stuck in the beginning of it. And I think that's an important point. So that is why this is coming to you now. I look forward to a question and answer on this. And what we're going to really go through is both the status of design for construction, where we are on right-of-way. I'm going to update it a little bit more than your slide even says, because I got an update just yesterday from our right-of-way division on exactly where we are. I want to note for you that while I'm going to discuss known and anticipated change orders that are in front of us, all of those are accounted for in our business plan and the revised budget we'll be bringing to this board in July. So even the sort of anticipated things we have in front of us, we've tried to account for those in the revised budget we'll be bringing to this board in July. And we identified in the 2020 business plan on page 91 the risks that are in front of us, really with respect to some of the change orders that we still have to work through on CP23. And so I want to state all of that at the outset before I go through this. And then last thing, we will have a discussion with the board to revise that budget as we get to the July hearing. We have to wait for the conclusion of a couple of things to ensure we have schedule right and budget right. One of those is concluding our settlement conversations with the FRA that'll affect schedule. And secondly, to get through the budget process that we're now in with the legislature to approve budget. And then we know we can come to you guys with the revised 2 budget in July. So those are some of the precursors. And with that, I'll jump into this and then happy to answer questions as we go along. I also have Daniel Horgan, who is the deputy chief operating officer, works closely with Joe Hedges on the construction program delivery issues. So they're both here to answer some questions as well. With that, if we can pull up the slide presentation, and Mr. Chairman, I'm mindful of time. I'll move as quickly as I can on this. Let's go to the next slide. I just covered that already. Of course, I just want to remind the members of our funding breakdown. The funding that we have available to this project comes from really three sources, 4 different elements. One is Prop 1A, which is the bond we passed in 2008. We are pursuing the additional $4.2 billion from that bond set in the governor's May revised budget to assure we can continue our construction work in the Central Valley. On the cap and trade program, we get 25% of annual revenues. That's come in historically at about $720 million a year pre-COVID. Since COVID, that's down to about $640 per year if you take into account the impacts from COVID. But again, we get that through 2030 under our current state funding program. And then, of course, we have both the ARA grant that was awarded from the federal government in 2008, of which we have spent all of those funds, and we have virtually matched all of those funds. The FRA has approved about 90% of our state match for those dollars. And of course, the outstanding federal grant is the FY10 grant, which the Trump administration attempted to rescind, and we are now in negotiations to get back through conversations with the Biden administration. Next slide. I'm going to defer to Joe in a minute on this slide. I just want to state that this slide is designed to inform the members sort of the importance of getting to 100% design. Again, what I'm laying out here is we're finally getting to 100% design of all the CPs, and that gives us greater certainty on the project and helps us manage it going forward. But with this, on this slide, I'm going to have Joe just walk through kind of the work that's been done to get to 100% design, and then how we will use this going forward for construction management. Joe?
Yes, sir. The big word here is the word in the middle, and that is certainty, and that is driving the unknowns to known. As you can see, the first element is reflected in that 100% design. The 100% design ensures that we've accounted basically for all of the third-party requirements. This has allowed them to state what the requirements are, which is one of the primary motivations and changes for adding scope to the contracts. Okay. Now, with that, with those third-party requirements determined, then we know what the design build scope must be with regards to the relocation of utilities, the modifications to structures and guideways. Okay. With that design build scope and design now known, then you can finalize the footprint. As you will see in later slides, we've added approximately over 300 parcels to our count in my tenure that reflects that. Okay. The other thing that it allows us to do with this now the scope is to institute change orders across all the CPs as to account for that new scope work. With that done, then you can then finally start to get a box around the idea of construction project management and start to implement the concept of earned value. So that's kind of the gist of this slide and the significance of that 100% design, what it reflects. It reflects certainty, pushing forward through all the issues that we've been having with third parties, and then cascading down to project management. Back to you, Brian.
You're on.
Yep. Thank you, Joe. Next slide, please. Sorry about that. Okay. Again, sort of working off of what Joe said, typically in design build contracts, you're at least at 30% design before you're into construction award. On the design bid build, you're at virtually 100% by the time you get to construction award. In 2021, with design now nearly at 100%, we've identified with greater certainty the number of right-of-way parcels that we need. We've estimated that at 2304, and that number goes up and down a little bit because we are doing some design alternatives to reduce the need for parcels, and as final scope comes in, some ticks up the need for parcels. But again, we're much better positioned now on what the needs are for right-of-way. We're developing our strategies to get that right-of-way in hand so we can complete the work. The last point I would make, as I said earlier, implementation of the stage gate process, I think, will help us greatly in future contracts to assure more risk is understood and known earlier in the process. Next slide. Go ahead, next slide. Again, just to orient all the members, I know many of you know this like the back of your hands, but we got the 3 construction packages that make up the 119 miles. The northernmost CP1 is 32 miles long. CP2-3 is the longest one and in many ways the most challenging because of that length, because of some of the commercial disputes that are there, and because of that's where the right-of-way needs are the greatest. And so 2-3 is some of the more challenging elements. And then CP4 is really the one that's in the steadiest state right now. It's the shortest, it's the last contract that was led, and it's in the best shape in terms of the number of parcels that are in hand, the work we're moving forward on, the design all complete, and the construction advancement we're making. That one's in the steadiest state, and I'll go through each of these as we go forward. Next slide. Again, getting close to that 100% design. We'll have that completed by the third quarter of 2021. I think Daniel and Joe would say by the end of June, early July. There are 164 different design packages that are required to get all of the design in hand on the 119-mile stretch. Today, as I'm speaking to you, we have 153 of those completed and 11 more to get. 8 are on 2-3 and 3 are in CP1. And again, we expect to have it all in hand by the end of the month, or end of June, early July. Next slide. A quick look at right-of-way, and I'm going to update the numbers on this because, as I said, I was speaking to our right-of-way head yesterday, and I just want to give you the latest and greatest on this. As Joe mentioned, as we get scope in hand, it means we perfect the right-of-way needs. So between 2018 and 2021, we delivered nearly 500 parcels to the project, but we also added 399 parcels, something that we have already reported through FNA and other places since the middle of 2020. But again, so everybody knows that we've both delivered parcels and added parcels to make sure we know exactly what we need to do to get this work done. This chart shows a parcel need of 2304 and then shows where we are and what we have left. There has been some pretty dramatic advancement through April and much of May. In April, we were able to acquire and deliver about 22 parcels. And thus far in May, we're averaging about a parcel a day. So we're going to exceed that April output. So just to update these numbers that are in front of you right now, based on yesterday's conversation, the total parcel need has dropped to 2292. It's down a little bit, as I said. We do some design alternatives to remove parcel requirements. So 2292 is now that number. We have delivered 1852 of that 2292, which means that 81% of the parcels are now in hand and delivered. As I mentioned earlier, May is a very productive month, and we're really on a record-setting pace for the month of May if we maintain this parcel a day acquisition performance strategy. So I want to just update those numbers for the board. Next slide, please. CP1, as I mentioned, is the 32-mile stretch that is the northernmost stretch going through Madera County and into most of Fresno, the city of Fresno itself. It extends 32 miles. There are 22 different grade separations, 3 viaducts, a major river crossing. The San Joaquin River Viaduct is one that you're seeing in that picture right there. This is the northern section of the entrance into the city of Fresno. And that, just mention that architectural element is similar to one where we exit the city of Fresno over what's called the Cedar Viaduct that crosses over Highway 99. Estimated date of completing this is December of 2023. That's consistent with what we reported in our business plan. Next slide. This is a nice description, very brief, but a sharp description of exactly where CP1 stands right now. As I said, design completed is about 92.5%. That right-of-way number, just based on the numbers I just updated to you, now stands at, given all the way through yesterday, right-of-way parcels delivered now stands at 86%, not 82.3, so that's up a bit. Utility relocations that are either started or completed are 57% of the need. Structures that are complete or in progress is roughly 70%, and the miles of guideway that's completed or in progress is at 40%. Our overall contract has expended 62.8 of the contract value percentage there. And so that's a small snapshot of where CP1 stands right now. Next slide. On this one alone, we have 40 design packages that we need to complete. And as of this date, we've completed 37 of those. And again, we'll look to complete the final 3 in the next month or so. Next slide. This just shows the advancement of that design work in 2018. 9 of 38 were complete. As I sit here today, 37 of 40 are done. And again, we'll be at 100% by the end of next month. Next slide. Change orders. There have been a lot on this project, as was noted earlier. We report all of these numbers and have reported all of these numbers to the F&A committee month over month. 16% of the change orders have been tied to time impacts and time delays, and 84% have been tied to scope changes. I can say that many of the scope changes are part of third-party requirements that we have to meet, whether they come from a local government like a city or county, sometimes a utility, and sometimes our railroad partner. For example, the intrusion protection barriers is a good example where the design of that wasn't completed until we got into 2018, 2019, and the execution of that change order was necessary to get that done. So 84% of them are tied to scope changes. And again, many of those are dictated through third parties that we work with on the project. Those are the sort of biggest change orders that have been done to date on this project. The intrusion protection barriers, the northern extension, some of the third-party utility relocations, Herndon Avenue grade separation, and then time-related impacts tied to the delay in getting right-of-way to date. Again, it's worth repeating that all of these are reported monthly to the Finance and Audit Committee. Of course, all change orders are made available on our website. Next slide. You see the value of the contract over time has gone up. Again, we every time change orders are entered into or completed, we update this to the F&A committee each month, and that's the original contract was at $1.23 billion, now stands at $2.3 6.2 to incorporate all the change orders to date since the post scope has come into focus. Next slide. There are some pending change orders that are in front of us that we will be working through to complete this work. The three here are all parts of City of Fresno requirements or scope changes. And again, they involve realignments of local roads. In one case on the Golden State Boulevard, increasing the width from 2 to 4 lanes, widening sidewalks and adding some bicycle lanes. There's utility issues where we have to work through a location of utilities here. And how and where we do that are all subject to an agreement with the City of Fresno that was concluded some time ago. Same is true for McKinley Avenue and Belmont Avenue. And again, we don't have full numbers on these yet, but we will soon and be updating the board on where these are in terms of the settlements that come through on these. But these are some of the challenges that are in front of us on CP1. Next slide. Similar ones for the freight railroads, where we are building either above, around, or next to these freight railroads, and also because we're building the intrusion protection barrier that they require, we are also required to make sure that they have access roads to maintain their tracks, and we'll be concluding that change order as well on CP1 going forward. And then the last, not the last one, but the sort of the last major one that's tied to CP1 is sort of part of the realignment of the State Route 99 that was done. When that was realigned, there was a requirement to finish 2.5 miles of at-grade guideway plus the intrusion protection wall between Clinton and Ashland Avenues. That stretch was dropped out of the 99 relocation contract at one point. It was in, then it was dropped out, but we still need to complete that work. So that work, that scope is now being finalized, and we'll be moving forward on that one as well. Next slide. That's sort of the look at what's in front of us on CP1. In CP23, this is the largest and in many ways the most complex stretch, and will involve some of the more complex negotiations we'll have to enter into going forward. And we will be coming back to the board on likely in some of the closed session opportunities to discuss some of the commercial settlement issues that we have here, because there could involve litigation, and we need to brief the board thoroughly on some of those complex issues that are before us on CP23. But just to give you the flavor of this one, this is the longest stretch, 65 miles, 36 grade separations to the counties of Fresno, Tulare, and Kings. There are viaducts, underpasses, and overpasses. And again, it's a point of pride to me that we are building 36 grade separations, because those are important safety elements where a railroad is coming through communities, and having that grade separated is not only usually a want of our local partners, but it's also an important safety measure. And so it's good we're building these, but it also adds to the complexity of the project. Next slide. The snapshot for CP23 looks like this, about 92% completed on the design side. With respect to the right-of-way parcels, that number 72% there is now up to 76% of the utilities that are required. So we're again moving forward on that. About half the utility relocations are either started or completed. Here, 53% of the structures are complete or in progress, and the miles of guideway is about 71% that we've got either completed or under progress right now. Overall contract expenditure versus contract value is about 62.3%. Next slide. On 2.3, there are a lot of ready for construction or RFC design packages that need to get done, 109. We have completed 101 of those. Again, that's a mammoth undertaking, mostly been done in the last 3 years, as you see on that chart there. We will complete the remaining 8 again in the next month and a half or so, by certainly the end of Q3 of 2021. Next slide. Again, you can see the advancement of the design work. 2018, about 2 of the RFCs were completed. Now we're at 101 as of today, and we'll complete the entire design package in the next, as I said, month and a half or so. Next slide. There's been 297 change orders involved with this through February of 2021. And again, the bulk of them are tied to scope changes that were negotiated with third parties. 29% are tied to time elements or time impact delays on the project. The big ones here involve some of the time impact issues that we've settled. Also the Hanford Viaduct substructure, where we've come to an agreement on the design. And now that we're moving to the final design issue, there was a change order to get the substructure done, and we'll come back for the superstructure, which is the sort of deck area on top of that. In the future, that's one of the commercial settlement issues we have to resolve here. Third-party utility relocations have been significant, and we had a significant change order dealing with subsidence issues on this one as well, and we dealt with that one already. And next slide. Again, that's just a snapshot. Again, we report this every month to the F&A committee, and this is just a snapshot of where it stands as of today. Original contract value was just under 1.4, and today that contract value is about 2.1 billion for CP23. Next slide. There are some important commercial issues that we will be working with the board on in the weeks ahead. I expect to come back to the board roughly on the June timeline and talk about strategies to deal with the Hanford Viaduct superstructure, which is a large sort of bridge deck issue viaduct that we have to work through with you. It's not a question of design, but it's a question of who owns what element of responsibility for the change here, and so that's an issue we'll come back to the board and talk about and develop a strategy to deal with that soon. A similar issue is the Bnsf intrusion protection barrier. We briefed the board on that last December, and this is one where there's 15 miles of barrier required, and the issue is, comes down to what should the design builder have known when, what should have been in the bid to deal with this, and these are some of the issues that commercial issues that we'll be working with our board to settle to make sure we get this work done, but also we get it done in a way that is fair. Next slide. The other two are similar issues where there was design changes on viaducts to make sure that certainly water can pass through underneath the viaducts, and the question of what was intended originally, what kind of changes were involved in the years since the original contract, and who has responsibility for what issues. These are things, again, we'll be coming back to the board on strategy involved in these so we can resolve these going forward. But again, they're known, and we're working on that in real time through legal and our commercial partners. Next slide. This is the construction package 4, which is the southernmost 22-mile stretch of construction. This is really the stretch that we call in a steady state right now. We're working pretty well on CP4. It's, as I said, 22 miles in the southernmost stretch through most of Kern County through Wasco. This is estimated to complete really in the next year. We estimate completion in April of 2022, and it'll be nice to get the first of the 119-mile CPs done. So we look forward to that in the next several months. Next slide. Again, you can see why we call this in a steady state. 100% design is completed. The right-of-way parcel number is just over 78% now, and you see the structures complete or in progress are over 90%, and the miles of guideway completed in progress is at 100%. We do have to go back and move some utilities, some relocation of utilities where we've worked around those, but we'll go back and move those as we complete this work out. And again, CP4 is in a pretty steady state, and we see this concluding in the next 10 or 11 months here. Next slide. Again, already stated this, we can move forward. 15 design packages are required, and as of March, they are all done, 100% design. Next slide. Again, same point. Last 3 years, we've completed all the design on this, and we're now moving forward on getting these guideway and structures completed so we can come in and start to lay track. Next slide. The change orders on this one are a little bit more limited than we've seen on the others. Been a total of 94 since the beginning of award of the contract. About 35% were tied to time delays, 65% tied to the various scope issues that we executed. Again, the leading one, a singular one, is the intrusion protection barrier, which again was a dividing barrier between our train service and freight train services that was required by the freights and subject to a negotiation starting, I think, back in, I want to say 2013 and 2014, and the final design was completed in recent years, and now we've moved forward on getting that done and getting through construction of that. And next slide. Original contract value here was $454 million, and it's now estimated at $639 million for CP4. Next slide. The one sort of remaining change order that's of major significance down here is SR 46. This is where we're doing a widening of an overpass. This SR 46 project is also tied to work that we are doing with Caltrans in the same area for a roundabout that'll be located near Wasco there. And this is also one where we have sought a federal grant to help complete this work and also mitigate this work. And that federal grant is still pending. So this is sort of the last major change order that's left on CP4. And again, it's important to note that that work does not really affect our ARA timeline. It's subject to a Kern County agreement, getting some of that work completed that will not affect the operations of the railroad itself, but that this is part of the SR 46 work we have left in front of us. Next slide. Again, all of the work we've done to date, I think it's important to remind folks of what it's meant from an economic development standpoint. There's been some 5,500 plus construction jobs created since construction began. Of the workers we've dispatched out to those sites, 3,700 have been what's called national target workers, or essentially those that come from disadvantaged communities. About 77% of our workforce in the Central Valley resides in the Central Valley, so it's been pretty good on getting local people employed. We have 609 small businesses that have worked on this. 192 are disabled business enterprises, 67 are DVBE enterprises, and again, since the beginning of construction with $7.2 billion expended, we've created about 60,000 job years and $11.4 billion in total economic output through January of this year. Next slide. Again, just to sort of flag some of the issues that we'll be looking to achieve in the next 12 to 15 months. We are working with the legislature now in the appropriation to complete the remaining work in the Central Valley, environmental clearance of the first two segments into LA County, Bakersfield to Palmdale. We're looking at coming to the board this summer on Burbank to LA by the end of the fourth quarter this year in 2021. We're hoping to award a track and systems contract and see that work commence in 2022. And of course, as you all know, we're working on negotiations with the FRA to retain our federal FY10 grant, about $929 million. And we're also hoping to advance the contracts later this year or early into 2022 to advance the design work for Merced and Bakersfield extensions, again, getting some of that stage gate process going for the future work beyond the 119 miles. And we'll also be coming back to the board on efforts to procure train sets as we get into the new year. So that's sort of a thumbnail, but I think an important description of where we are on the construction packages and what's before us over the course of the next year or so. I think that's the entirety of the presentation. Yeah. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you,
Tom,
Brian.
I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, please, Ernie.
Brian, that's probably the most comprehensive program update I've ever had and understood, and I compliment you and the staff for doing this. It's a great job.
Thank you, Ernie. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to echo that comment. Thank you for that report.
Thank you, Henry.
Thank you, Henry. Jim, did you have yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I ditto on the presentation. But, my concern has always been, we went to contract too early. And that's why we've had all these cost overruns. So I hope that we're going to do design, bid, build in the future, especially when we're hopefully going to Merced and to Bakersfield and other future projects. It's the only way we can keep our arms around our costs. And so I would suggest that the board at some point take a position and a policy that that's what we end up doing.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Good
Brian?
presentation.
Yes, Lynn, you? Okay.
No, I was just going to say, good presentation, really good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah. And I'll echo the same thing, Brian. Excellent job. Thank you very much.
Really great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on then to the CEO report.
Just when you thought you were done hearing from me.
We love you, man.
I am pleased to start this CEO update with good news for the board. And I know I want to thank Director Scutia, who has over the course of several months asked me often about the status of the work we're doing around the Fairmead community. And I know during the public comment period, you heard a couple of callers call in and talk about our work together on that. And I'm just pleased to report to the board today that as of this morning, we have wrapped all 3 agreements with the County of Merced, the City of Chowchilla, and the Friends of Fairmead to get the commitments in place to meet all of our environmental justice mitigation requirements that were part of the Y document. I gotta say that this has only been done through tremendous work by our Central Valley Regional Director, Garth Fernandez, by Authority Council, Lisa Crowfoot, and by the Director of Projects for Northern California, Gary Kennerly. I also want to acknowledge our partners in Madera County, the City of Chowchilla, and the community of Fairmead itself for their collective cooperation and commitment to see these through. Now, none of these agreements were easy, I must say, but each is meaningful, and collectively, they are vital for the community of Fairmead. And so I just want to thank all the parties who participated in this and got us to this point. I also just want to say that I love public service when it's demonstrated at its best, and I want to say, in my view, that Garth, Lisa, Gary Kennerly demonstrated the very best of it. Great commitment, tenacity, and dedication toward getting these done, and I want to acknowledge them and thank them for that work. And so I want to start with that.
Thank you, Brian. And the winner obviously is the community of Fairmead, and that's the most meaningful of all. Thank you. Yes, Martha.
Yeah, just wanted to thank Brian and Garth and Lisa and everybody else that you mentioned. I've never been to Fairmead, but I just want to thank you, Brian, because this was very meaningful, and that this is a perfect example of how progress in the sense of a high-speed rail does not necessarily mean that we run over communities, that we can basically lift communities along the way, to take advantage of that progress. So I think it's a win-win for everybody, and I thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience in dealing with my incessant concerns about this.
Well-founded. I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, other updates for you. I just want to let the board know that our planning division lead, Meg Cederoth, working closely with our counsel's office, did recently conclude a very high-level MOU, which is really an expression to work collaboratively and cooperatively with the City of Bakersfield on station development, station planning issues in Bakersfield. The MOU, which is countersigned by the mayor and key city staff, expresses both parties' intent to work collaboratively and cooperatively on the development of the Bakersfield Station site concept plan. And so, as I've indicated to this board before, Authority staff intends to bring to the board later this year an RFP to advance preliminary station designs for the 4 stations in the Central Valley, Merced, Fresno, Kings Tulare, and Bakersfield. And the MOU with the city of Bakersfield is both timely and a helpful commitment from both sides to work cooperatively on station development and ensure so that we can ensure functionality, access, and community enhancement. So I just wanted to let you know that that's underway. Yes, Henry. Oh, sorry, you're muted. Henry, I'm sorry, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Road 27, Brian in Madera, is that on
Yes.
time, on schedule to reopen soon?
It is. Is Joe still on? I think, yeah, Joe, can you confirm that? I believe it is still on schedule.
Thank you.
Henry, but if Joe's on, I just want him to confirm my understanding.
I don't think he has.
Okay. May have lost Joe. Sorry.
I do believe it's on schedule.
Henry, I will follow up directly on that.
Great,
but
thank
yes.
you. Okay.
Oh, there you
Joe.
are, Joe.
Yeah, it is on schedule. It's advancing actually very, very well.
Great. What is that date?
I have to go back and look and get the exact date from you with regards to the RBS schedules, but I'll go back and get the date. For
Okay, because we were picking up some chatter down here about the schools being concerned that it be open for their in August for their school reopening to avoid all that traffic situation they've had.
Understood. I'll go back. I'll check. The work is right now is moving very, very well. We're clicking off right now predominantly all of the first order work. And
okay.
Okay, just if
you could just let us know the reopening date. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, I'll move quickly here to just a couple of other things. I know there's been a lot of interest in the federal grant application for the SR 46 project in the city of Wasco. I mistakenly informed the board, mea culpa here. I mistakenly informed the board that that grant was going to be awarded at the end of April, or that they would make announcements at the end of April. The FRA and USDOT will make those awards in June. So the good news is we're not so far away from June, but I thought they were going to announce those earlier than they actually are. So we will hear soon about that. I'll just also add that while we're waiting for that, the USDOT did announce another notice of funding opportunity for what used to be called build grants, are now called raise grants. And we are evaluating options for us to apply for one of those as well. So we'll come back to the board on that as we go forward.
Brian,
yes.
if I may, do you feel pretty confident we're going to get this grant?
It's hard. I mean, it's hard to know. I'll tell you what I feel confident about. I read very closely what the grant is intended to be for. I know the elements of the project, and I think we hit all of the elements, the purposes of the grant very well. And so I feel I'm confident about that. I don't know how many applications have come in nationally, but I feel good that it's a project that is absolutely on spot for what those grants are intended for.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Did we send anything from the board, or can we, or should we sometimes support?
I don't. I mean, as an entity who's the applicant, clearly we're in support, and we did send support letters from elected officials around the area, both in the Senate, the Assembly, and in the mayor's office down there.
All right, great, good job.
Okay, 2 more items, and then I'm done. One is I just want to inform the board that State Controller Betty Yee has an appointment to the peer review group, the High Speed Rail peer review group. She has recently made that appointment to fill a vacancy. She's appointed Professor William Ibbs to the peer review group. Professor Ibbs is an internationally known consultant in construction management on mega projects. He teaches at UC Berkeley, and he founded and leads the construction management dispute resolution firm, the Ibbs Consulting Group. So just want to welcome Dr. Ibbs to the peer review group and let the board know and others we will be meeting with Dr. Ibbs and PRG members at the end of June. So I want to make sure you knew that appointment was made. And then lastly, but I think very importantly, we are preparing to bring to the board for its consideration the final EIR and EIS documents for the Bakersfield to Palmdale segment. This is the 80 plus mile segment of phase one that represents the first segment we would be approving into Los Angeles County. To ensure that we can prepare the documents sufficiently and provide for necessary public review prior to bringing them to the board for its consideration, we plan to publish the documents in June and we'll bring them before the board in August to consider certification of that ROD and approval of those documents. As you may recall, these hearings, where we bring an environmental document for your consideration, are typically 2-day meetings. So the board can fully consider the issues, the comments, and the responses surrounding the environmental work. So I just want to inform board members, we currently have an August meeting scheduled for August 19th. It is not currently scheduled as a 2-day meeting, but we do need to probably find 2 days in August. And so Natalie Murphy will be reaching out to coordinate August schedules so we can handle that issue. So I just wanted to report that to the board members and Mr. Chairman and members. With that concludes my CEO report. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Anybody have any comments or questions for Brian?
Yeah, I do. Brian, any thoughts about when we can meet in person? Some of these things are, I mean, we're getting into the rhythm here, but it's so much better when we're together.
Yeah, we're operating off of guidance by, CalHR and obviously the public health agency and certainly the governor's office. I know that there's been talk about quote normalization on June 15th, but I think we are still waiting for specific guidance on how and when we can open that process. Alicia, I see is opened up her mic, so I just want to ask Alicia, is there anything I need to add there to that, or anything new?
No, I think that's perfect. That we are kind of one board of so many in the state, and we're kind of following the direction of the governor.
Well, I know, but I thought you might have heard something. Okay, thanks.
Will you let us know, Brian, if that August meeting, the 2 days, is virtual or in person as soon as you can?
I will. Yes.
Okay. Brian, thank you very much. Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, our colleagues, I'm just going to go very quickly over a couple of things on the Finance and Audit Committee today. As you may have guessed, we chose not to have the Central Valley update because of Brian's report during the board meeting. So we only had the report from Finance, and a couple of quick things on Finance. Accounts payable, there was about a 20% reduction in our disputed payables. That leaves us a balance of about $62.5 million. In terms of cash management, that is the amount of money that the authority currently has, which is this, by the way, these numbers are for the month of March. We had in the month of March 1.8 billion. That was up by about 668,500,000, which were the results of receipts that we received from the cap and trade auction. The February auction yielded about 162 million to the authority. We should receive that, I believe, next month. And as you may know, yesterday, May the 19th, there was another auction. We don't know the results and won't know for probably another week. But our CFO is optimistic with regards to the auction without knowing what the numbers may be based upon just the amount of market activity. In terms of state staff versus consultant staff, in our form to function program, state staff is up year over year, about 37 employees, while the consultant staff is down by about 28. In terms of capital outlays for the month of March, the outlays were 83.5 million. That was about 20 million lower than the month before. Included in the 83.5 million were construction package expenses of 69.9 and payments to the design build contractors of roughly 49 million. In terms of the contracts with the DBs, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 1 and 2, 3 are about the total contracts are funded now through about 62%, and on CP4, about 67%. The 2021 budget was 2.9 billion. The reforecast of that budget is about 1.8. Project expenditures, that is the total amount expended, is about 8.2 billion from the outset, of which 75% has been spent on construction, 16% on project development, 2% on administration, 5% on local assistance. In terms of the state match, the combination of what has been approved, which is 1.6 billion roughly, there is another 900 million pending at FRA for approval. Upon the approval of that, we will have met, or the state will have met its state match for our grant. Frankly, I think that probably is a reasonably good summary of just where we are financially. Any questions from anybody on that? Seeing none, then that concludes the open meeting portion of today's board meeting. We will now move into public session. And for those of you who are with us listening and or watching, we will now go into public session, private session, private meeting, closed meeting. I suspect it will last less than an hour. And at the end of that, I'll return and report on behalf of the board if there's anything to bring to the attention of the public. So with that, thank you for joining us. And those who will hang around, we'll be back to you in about an hour. We'll now go to closed session. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tom Richards. We have, and the California High-Speed Rail Authority Board, we've been in closed session. I'm back here to report to you that we are going to continue both sections of the closed session. If you want to join the open portion of the meeting, before we go into closed session, this will be next Monday at 2 p.m. That's the 24th of May, 2 p.m. We will open the meeting in open session and we'll go to closed session. And again, after the closed session, I'll come back to report to you anything that the board directs to be reported at the close of the closed session on Monday, the 24th at 2 p.m. So with that, thank you all for hanging in there with us. Have a good balance of the day and a good weekend, and we'll hopefully see you or hear from you on Monday. Oh, I will say one other thing. There will be no comments from the public. When we have a closed ARNI meeting that's been continued, we've done that at the day that the meeting was originally called. And so again, Monday only will be closed session and a report to the public after the closed session. So again, thank you all very much and enjoy your day and the weekend and stay safe. This meeting will be continued. California High-Speed Rail Authority Board of Directors meeting. As I mentioned last week, when we continued the meeting from last week, we would be getting together this afternoon at 2 p.m. We are going to immediately go into closed session. And as I also mentioned, and as those of you who were with us last week know, we've already received a public comment for this meeting, and therefore there will be no public comment today. What we'll do now is move into closed session. And upon completion of the closed session, I'll come back and report anything that the board has to report to the public. So in the interim, please hang in there, and we'll be back, I suspect today, well inside of 1 hour. So thank you, and we will now move to closed session. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the California High-Speed Rail Authority Board of Directors meeting. This is May the 24th, obviously, a continuation of our May 20th meeting. We have been in closed session this afternoon, and the closed session is been completed for today. I would let you know for your calendars, we are continuing again this meeting, specifically the closed session portion of this meeting, to Wednesday, the 26th at 5 p.m. That's this coming Wednesday, May 26th at 5 p.m. That being said, in addition to that, I also wanted to let you know that the board does have a statement it is prepared to deliver to the public at this point. And that is, in response to certain anonymous complaints to the board of directors about the authority's business practices and personnel, the board chair formed a special matters committee to oversee a review of the complaints. The special matters committee, the board of directors, and the authority maintain confidentiality with respect to personnel matters. The committee hired outside counsel and a forensic accounting firm to conduct a confidential and independent investigation. The independent investigation found no fraud in the authority's business practices as alleged in the complaints. As a result of the review, the board recommended certain communication and documentation process changes designed to ensure all authority activities are accurately recorded and reported. The authority values accountability in our business operations and strict adherence to authority policies and state contracting law. The Special Matters Committee has concluded its work on this matter. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we will now continue today's board meeting to May the 26th at 5 p.m. Have a good afternoon and good day.